Hey, you are live, sir.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. This is the monthly meetup that I have. We are alternating months, so this month it's virtual and next month it will be back in person. I actually prefer in person because I will read questions that I've already received and I'll feel like I'm talking to myself for the next hour. But I do appreciate you all for submitting questions and for being here. Lindsay, can you tell everyone how they can submit questions during this call?
Yes, they can direct message us on all social media, Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter. They can also put questions in the chats on Facebook and YouTube, which is where we are broadcasting.
Okay, and I might ask you to repeat that in a bit. So let me go through questions that I've gotten. Some of them are a little bit redundant, but I'll just read them and answer them. We are so grateful for your support of the district child tax credit. We want to know this. Do you see any obstacles to moving the funded provisions of the bill in the Budget Support Act across the finish line? I don't see obstacles. The proposal that we have is not as robust as we had wanted, but we at least have it in the budget and it's a start. And my hope is that in the coming years, we will expand it substantially. We know that the child tax credit can be a great benefit and also can make a difference with regard to children born into poverty, or families who are struggling with poverty. But in any event, it's in the budget. Funding for it is in the budget. The language is in the Budget Support Act, and I don't see that there'll be any effort to strike it. So it will get across the finish line. Second question, did the original budget recommendations of their respective committees for the Office of Advisory Neighborhood Commissions and DDOT sidewalk maintenance programs survive the budget markup of the full council intact? Or did these committees' requests for these two items get cut? There's a lot of stuff that is in the budget, and so I do not remember these items specifically, but the fact I don't remember them is, I think, confirmation in my mind that we did not change what the committees recommended. It's sort of a not as 100% positive, but I am pretty sure that they survived the budget markup of the full council intact. And I did discuss this with the budget director earlier, and she was of the same view. Regarding the proposed new income tax or on interest from non-DC municipal bonds owned primarily by middle-income seniors who use this bond interest to fund their retirement, what is the chairman's position on grandfathering existing bonds and bond funds? Something that every state changing their policy on taxing such bonds has done, and which the Tax Revision Commission has previously recommended when considering this tax. My position is that I support the legislation that we have, but let me answer with more particularity. What is the chairman's position on grandfathering existing bonds and bond funds? I do not support that change. What came out of the Committee on Business and Economic Development was that the exemption for all municipal bonds, regardless of what state issued them, would cease beginning with the current year, which has the effect of being retroactive to this past January 1st. When I presented for first reading, first vote, the budget as well as the Budget Support Act with language regarding this, I revised that so that the applicability begins next January or next tax year. So those who have municipal bonds from other jurisdictions have until the rest of this year, if they want, to restructure their investments. So grandfathering would be going further, and I don't support that. The question also says something that every state changing their policy on taxing such bonds has done. I'm not aware of that. And we did a quick search before this meetup and could not find evidence of that. It is my understanding that the district, maybe one other jurisdiction, exempts from taxation interest earned on municipal bonds from other states, which is to say that the district was an outlier. Which is to say that every state has been taxing interest on municipal bonds, except for the municipal bonds issued by that state. And if I'm correct in that, which I believe I am, or close to correct, then there would not be instances where states change their policy, as we are doing now in the district. The question also includes this point, which the Tax Revision Commission previously recommended. Well, my understanding is not quite. First, the Tax Revision Commission has not issued recommendations. However, there was a chairman's mark, which was a proposal that was, in fact, I don't know if I want to say rejected or not adopted by the commission. They haven't made their recommendations yet. But in that mark, as I understand it, it did not recommend as the first position that there be a grandfathering. It simply recommended that non-DC municipal bonds should no longer be tax exempt. Non-DC municipal bonds should no longer be tax exempt. That was their recommendation. As a backup or second recommendation, they said, well, if you're not comfortable with that, then consider grandfathering existing bonds. But as I said, in the end, they haven't made any recommendation. Next question. How do you square imposing a tax or income? How do you square imposing a tax on income from non-DC municipal bonds with making the district an attractive place for people to stay during retirement? The end of the non-DC municipal bond exemption upends the financial planning of people at all income levels and denies district citizens the ability to invest in a diverse array of municipal obligations. Given DC's already heavy income tax burden, not to mention its onerous estate tax regime, are you not concerned that there will be yet another reason for taxpayers to abandon the district? So there's several questions there. Am I concerned? Yes. Do I think that there will be a significant number of residents who are going to leave because of this? No, I don't think so. There's been research in the past with regard to DC's taxes. This, I think, was by the Tax Revision Commission in 2013, who found that tax burden is not a primary consideration for people to locate or relocate. And when one compares the tax burden of DC with the tax burden in the surrounding jurisdictions, they're not that much different. So yes, the highest tax rate on our income tax is higher than the tax rate in Maryland and Virginia. I don't like that, but having said that, if you look at the total tax burden, which includes sales tax, personal property tax, which we do not have, real property tax, and so forth, the burdens are not that much different. So an individual tax may be considerably higher. In fact, I see in this question, there's also a reference to our, quote, onerous estate tax regime, unquote. I would like to see the estate tax threshold higher than what it is. I disagreed with the amendment, voted against the amendment when it changed in 2021. However, I believe that our threshold is comparable or not much different than either the federal or adjacent states. When I say threshold, the estate tax applies to estates over a certain amount. Used to be years ago, it was $1 million or more. And I think the federal government raised it to over $10 million. And I think we tried to go there. We ended up with this amendment that I opposed, bringing it down. But in any event, I don't think it's that much different than the other states. I've gotten carried away from the question. The I I do not think that given the amount of revenue that we will be getting from this change, which if I remember correctly is about $15 million a year, um, when it's fully implemented, as I said, it's applicable beginning next year. That says to me that there are not a lot of individuals who are affected by this, and the amount by which they are affected is not a lot. So I hope I've answered that question. The next question, do you support or oppose Mayor Bowser's budget SBREC devaluation plan? SREC refers to solar renewable energy credits. Why would the city discourage solar panel installation by reducing the incentives? I do not support what the mayor proposed. And there were quite a number of conversations, both within the council and between me and council members and a number of folks who are very active with regard to solar energy and renewable energy. And in order to reverse what the mayor proposed would have cost, as I recall, over $35 million a year, which was money we simply didn't have. But I think that what the mayor proposed was not only anti-environmental, but also the way she proposed it caused some damage to the progress that the district has made in promoting renewable energy. We made some adjustments to lessen the damage, if I can put it that way. But in the end, it was too much of an expense for the council to be able to completely reverse what the mayor proposed. She proposed some other changes with regard to environment, cutting some of the programs at Department of Environment and Energy and Environment, and also just eliminating the dollars in the green bank for the current year. We were able to restore about 60% of what she had cut with the green bank. The next question, are you open to assisting urban gardeners in proposed legislation that would change some of the archaic laws concerning tree boxes? Well, I'm always open to considering any proposal. I don't know what the proposal is. I'm not aware of archaic laws concerning tree boxes. I'm speculating that it might be some of regulations that the Department of Transportation has regarding tree boxes, but I would have to know more before I could say I would support a proposal, because I don't know what the proposal is, but I'm open to hearing more. Next question, Lindsay, I've got three. This is the first of three remaining questions.
Alrighty.
Is there no way that the city can stop the installation of artificial turf at the Murray Field site in Upper Northwest? Well, I suppose the correct answer would be that yes, the city could probably find a way to stop the installation. It would be extraordinary, probably subject to legal challenge because Moray is a private school. And I believe that they are acquiring and will be using a field that is privately owned. It's not a government field. So basically, the question would be asking the city to intervene with a private matter. And I don't see that happening. I want to add a little more. We did have a debate about turf versus natural field at Lafayette School. And the council ended up voting against artificial turf there, but there was quite a bit of controversy. I think the vote was the bare minimum to reverse what the mayor was doing at Lafayette, but that's a publicly owned field. Next question. I'm curious, what happened to your plan to have free bus service in DC? Good question. So in 2022, we adopted legislation that set the district on a path toward free Metro bus service in DC. We funded it through revenue growth in the December 2022 revenue estimate. The revenue estimate came in and the revenues were sufficient to fund the legislation. The CFO, in an act with which I vigorously objected, canceled that funding with the February revenue estimates. I believe that he did not have the authority to do that and was violating both the intent and the letter of the law that we passed regarding free bus service. However, the mayor did not support free bus service, which I thought was a bit interesting since she has been promoting free bus service for students, free bus service on the circulator, free bus service, I think, for seniors, but she did not support free bus service for Metrobus in the district. So when the CFO, in my view, exceeded his authority, I'll put it that way, and essentially canceled the funding for the legislation. The mayor, of course, went along, and when she submitted her budget a year ago, which was almost as bad as this year's submission, she did not fund free bus service. It's a little hard to remember because it was a year ago and there's been a budget since then, but that budget had a whole lot of cuts and we were focused on restoring those cuts. And so free bus service did not make it in the budget. At the same time, the WMATA board sent a letter to the council, to me, saying, we object and we will not implement this free bus service for Metrobus. And they're the ones who actually decide. We got them to agree to make that a temporary measure, that is, that they would not support last year free bus service. So with all those factors, the mayor's lack of support, the CFO exceeding his authority, WMATA board being opposed, and the budget being too tight to be able to fill all the gaps, the legislation is still effective, but the funding for it does not exist, and therefore it is not being implemented. There were other portions to that legislation, like 24-hour service on, I think it was 7 bus routes that was implemented. So the free bus service has to wait for another day. Last question. Did council approve of the voting precinct map as the law requires, and was it published in the DC Register? What determines whether Board of Elections can put 2 voting centers in 1 voting precinct? The council has not approved a voting precinct map. There was, for a brief moment, an effort to get us to approve something, and we did not. So I don't think anything's been published in the Register. With regard to putting 2 voting centers in 1 voting precinct, as I understand the question, that would be a decision of the board. It would not be a decision of the council. With that, I am out of questions. Lindsay.
All right, we got a couple. Oh, I think I'm echoing. We got a couple asked in the chat and a couple that got submitted after our deadline. So first is, my question is, can you share more information on where the budget landed with teacher cuts in the schools? I know you work so hard to maintain equity in our schools, and I thank you for that.
2 things. First, we shifted over $25 million from DCPS Central to individual schools. And in that way, we were able to fully restore funding in every school consistent with the Schools First in Budgeting Act. Now, at the same time, the executive, which means that in this case, the chancellor working with the chief financial officer, recalculated the average position cost, which is a calculation required under the teacher's contract. Schools do not pay out of their budget, are not budgeted to pay the actual salaries of teachers. They pay the average position cost. And that gets reconciled across the entire DCPS. And the average position cost went up. So many schools in the mayor's proposal saw a cut in their budget. More schools saw, well, maybe I shouldn't say more. In addition, some schools saw that their buying power was less because the average position cost had gone up substantially, like by 18%. When put together, it meant that, if I remember correctly, over 80 schools were having to lay off a teacher or another adult educator in the school, 80 schools. And we were able to restore funding pursuant to the Schools First in Budgeting Act. But that doesn't mean that every school, because of the increase in the position cost, was able to restore or will be able to restore every position that they thought they would have to cut. Nonetheless, what Schools First is about is a stability, financial stability for schools. And by shifting $25 million over the vigorous objection of the mayor and the chancellor, we made a major step toward continuing with financial stability for our schools. I think there was a little bit more, yes. We also, for Ward 7 and 8 elementary schools, added funding for an additional position on the theory that most of those schools have a high number of at-risk students, could use more resources, and that while Schools First in Budgeting deals with school finances, it's really about stability, not equity. And so putting some additional dollars for one additional position in these Ward 7 and 8 elementary schools, we're providing more resources in the name of equity. So all that passed the budget. Final reading was yesterday. Next question, Lindsay.
Follow up on the free bus question. What's happening with free buses for seniors?
I don't know. I don't know if there was funding for that. I think that's done through the Department of For-Hire Vehicles. I just don't know where that program is.
Okay, why do apartment buildings pay a residential tax of 85, I assume that means 85 cents, when they are really commercial investments? For example, a $150,000 condo pays the same tax rate as a $200 million apartment building. As a matter of fact, the DC tax rate for apartments is 30% lower than Arlington and Montgomery counties.
Many, many years ago, we taxed apartment buildings at a higher rate. And there was a strong feeling that if we wanted to promote multifamily apartments, many of which are affordable, that we should not have a higher tax rate for apartment buildings. We do provide residents of lower income, doesn't have to be like super low income, the ability to get a property tax credit, which they pay a portion of through their rent. That's Schedule H on the income tax. So the thinking is that in the name of affordability and the fact that apartment buildings, while they may be a business, are also residential, that's why the rate was changed, I'm going to say 20 years ago, to be the same for all residential. With this budget, however, we have created a new subcategory for residential, which would be residences that are valued at $2.5 million or more. So if there's a condo valued at $2.5 million, and there are a few, I'd like to see some, or houses that are valued at $2.5 million or more, they will pay a higher rate, that is $1 instead of 85 cents on the amount of the assessment over $2.5 million. It is correct that at 85 cents, our real property tax rate, residential real property tax rate, is the lowest in the region. Arlington comes in, I think, next at just over $1. But of course, housing in the district is tends to have a higher value than in any of the surrounding jurisdictions. So DC residents pay more in property taxes for comparable dwellings than our suburban neighbors, even though the rate is the same. Real property tax is one of the most stable taxes that a jurisdiction has, and also one of the most difficult in terms of taxpayers, because it is a tax on wealth, that is the value of the property, rather than a tax on ability to pay, which is what the income tax is. So there are folks who complain that it is unfair that somebody who has a $2 million house pays the same rate as somebody who has a $200,000 house. Well, the rate may be the same, but the amount they pay is much more. And with the homestead exemption, the person who has a $200,000 house actually pays a lower percentage of their income, if there is income, or a lower percentage correlated to wealth than the person who has the $2 million house because of the homestead deduction. And now with the higher rate, there's even more what we call progressivity in the real property tax. Lindsay?
Another tax question, though I promise we'll try to move away from that. Do you support transitioning to a business activity tax instead of or in addition to payroll tax in future budgets? What would need to happen to make that, to effectuate that change?
I think we need to know more about the business activity tax, which is like a value-added tax. That was a recommendation that has been under consideration by the Tax Revision Commission. It was maybe one of the more controversial recommendations, and a reason why they were unable to adopt recommendations. So we need to see more about it and give it more consideration. My understanding is that the effect would be to broaden the base, which is a very good thing. Now I forget what I was going to say on that. Can you repeat the question, Lindsay?
Do you support transitioning a business act to a business activity tax instead of or in addition to a payroll tax in future budgets?
Yeah. I think what we did with the payroll tax was not the best policy move. We took what was the tax adopted for universal paid leave, and we increased it considerably. And I want to be careful how I characterize this. I think it just may not have been the best way to capture business taxes, and I think the business activity tax may be a better way. At this point, all of this discussion is hypothetical. There needs to be much more understood about the business activity tax, and we also have to see how the increase in the payroll tax plays out. But I actually would like I think it would be great if the Tax Revision Commission could revisit this at both taxes and give us some good, clear recommendations. Lindsay?
Follow up on the Murray turf situation. Someone asked, does the Department of the Environment have any say over what can happen on private land?
That is a very broadly worded question. So, for example, if there is a stream, some wetlands on the private property, I'm pretty sure the Department of Energy and Environment has a say. The question, of course, seems to be related to this field that Murray wants to improve. I don't think the Department of Energy and Environment has say over that. I'm not positive, but that's the best answer I can give.
Okay, why is the whole government so fixated on Connecticut Avenue? It is actually quite safe and an essential commuting route for downtown. Downtown Resurrection depends on people coming on a commute that is not frustrating. Connecticut Ave is just fine the way it is.
You know, I love some of these questions. So I was unaware until you asked the question, Lindsay, that the whole government was fixated on Connecticut Avenue. It is true that I've gotten a lot of emails on both sides of the issue, which has to do with bike lanes on Connecticut Avenue. It is true that the Transportation Committee did discuss and mark up a recommendation in that regard. It is true that a small amount of conversation at one of our legislative meetings 2 weeks ago talked about this. But I would not characterize that as the whole government fixated on Connecticut Avenue. It's my view that the council does not have a role with regard to the mayor's determination of where or where not to put bike lanes, and that we should not be getting involved in this case. That the folks who feel strongly one way or the other need to be focusing their energies on the mayor.
Okay, this is a question. Have concerns been raised about the OIG report on the district integrated financial system from September 2023?
What was the question again? I got the report, but what was it?
Have concerns been raised about it? It seems concerning.
I guess the correct answer is no, because I have not heard anything about that report since last fall.
Okay. OSSI is currently accepting public comments on a draft report they must submit to the federal government by the end of the month. This report outlines their intended use of federal child care funds over the next 3 years. While some of OSSI's proposals will make child care more affordable, there's always room for improvement. Will you meet with advocates before the end of the month to discuss suggestions for how the district can do more to support children and families, and submit a letter to OSSI outlining the recommendations you support?
If there's a request to meet with me through the normal process, then yes, I'll try to fit it into my schedule. I'm not sure that my sending a letter would make that much difference. However, until there's such a meeting, I don't know for sure. So this is something that typically, because with this kind of federal program, this is something that typically happens between the executive agency, in this case OSSI, and the federal agency without much council involvement. It certainly doesn't require our action. But if advocates want to meet with me about it, sure. Lindsay, remind folks how they can submit questions.
Oh, via the chat on YouTube, which has gotten very busy, and Facebook as well. And via social media on Twitter, well, X, Facebook, and Instagram. Next question. Would you share any advice on how to support Give SNAP a raise for seniors now that the budget process has ended? I would love to continue to share hope for our seniors who are getting the minimum benefit.
Yeah, let me say a couple of things. First of all, there's some programs that the mayor had defunded that we restored funding to that help seniors. For instance, the shallow subsidy program, which is a rent assistance program. Now, I realize that's not the same as food, which is what SNAP is all about. I also know that the council has now tried for over a year to increase SNAP, that's foods, what we used to call food stamps, SNAP benefits for all DC residents. The focus most recently has been on seniors because seniors is a subset of the total population that could benefit from a better or larger SNAP payments. And I frankly, I think that the increasing SNAP benefits is important and is a worthy thing for us to do. And I think as an interim step, helping seniors has merit. We were not able to fund that in this budget. I said to members over and over again, we have to make choices. We have to prioritize. We cannot fund everything. So we had requests to fund 1,000 vouchers. We had requests to increase funding for ERAP, emergency rental assistance, to 60 or $100 million. The initial proposal with regard to the child tax credit was, I'm going to say, 3 times larger than what we were able to fund. we can't do everything. And what we've seen year after year is that a lot of what we fund doesn't end up getting implemented. There was the controversy last December over SNAP. Years ago, we put in funding for over 1,000 vouchers, and the money was used for other purposes. I don't like it when the mayor does this, but we can't force her to spend money generally, not always, but generally. And so what I'm trying to say is that give SNAP a raise, as worthy as it is part of this larger menu of which we were able to fund a lot, but not everything. I am hopeful that next year we will be able to find funding for give SNAP a raise.
How were you able to, oh, I'm sorry. Why did the city buy the National Theater? Couldn't our money be better spent somewhere else?
Well, let me see. I'm going to give a bit of a philosophical answer there. The government does a lot of things. We don't just do one thing, like we're going to just help with affordable housing. I've often thought about this, there are thousands of people, tens of thousands of people who are struggling with poverty, need a safety net. So why are we doing things like paying for trees? But the government does a lot of things and has to do a lot of things. So the National Theater comes under the category of how do we maintain and further invigorate downtown. The National Theater has an opportunity to acquire its building at below market price this year. And with that, they would have more stability, more control over their programming, and might even be able to go further and begin to activate from time to time Freedom Plaza. At least that's what their long-term thinking is. So it's an opportunity to support the arts downtown and to ensure that we have a thriving theater district, and to be able to do this at a limited opportunity below market cost. So that's the answer. It turns out coincidentally that the mayor had in her budget proposal roughly the same amount of money for a half thought out downtown arts hub. And so in a sense, we traded one for the other. I say in a sense because that's not exactly what happened, but that comparison could be made. Lindsay?
How were you able to restore the cuts to pay equity fund? Do you anticipate having to do this again in future budget years? And what do you say about people claiming the council was fiscally irresponsible in this budget?
All right, you're going to have to repeat that question in a minute because there were several parts to it.
Okay.
The mayor, in her defense, I've been a little bit critical of her here, but it was not her choice to zero out the pay equity program. So let me just remind folks, in case they've forgotten, that the chief financial officer said that the fiscal stabilization reserve was underfunded by about $200 million. And that even though the law has a process for replenishing it, that the mayor had to appropriate dollars for it in this budget. And this was a fight between the mayor and the chief financial officer. I joined the mayor on this, took her side. The CFO would not budge. The mayor could not submit her budget without meeting the CFO's demands, so she zeroed out the program. That was not her intent. She's made that clear. It was not her intent to zero out the program. She did propose reducing the program from about, reducing it to about $50 million a year. Now, I don't know that I would have agreed with those reductions. Well, actually, I didn't, but she had to zero it out. So I made it clear from the beginning, meaning as soon as this controversy arose, and then when the mayor submitted the budget, that I was not going to go along, that I was going to disagree with the CFO, and that I was not going to put the money in the fiscal stabilization reserve account, because there's a way to do that already. And so that money would go back to the pay equity fund. And then we were able to find additional dollars so that it is through the financial plan. It's a 4-year plan budgeted at $70 million a year. There's a task force that was created several years ago. When we first started this, the task force designed what the program would look like. That task force has been reconvened, and they're going to look at the program, the experience over the last couple of years, the $70 million, and make recommendations on what we can do or we should do going forward. There are some who have said that the program ought to be, quote, fully funded, unquote. That's a term I always love, because what does it actually mean? But in this case, it means something like $90 million. But I've had a number of conversations with folks who've been involved with the program, and $70 million is closer to the actual cost. The higher cost involves millions more for health care, which it turns out from experience are not needed. Also, is based on some one-time funding that was provided to daycare or childcare centers, rather, that were first entering the program. And as I said, those were one-time subsidies. So that is a reason why the $70 million is a more realistic number in terms of what's actually been spent and what's needed going forward. I will add that this cannot be a program that just grows and grows and grows so that it's 70 million. I think actually this last year it was less than 70 million. And then it's 70 million this year, and then it's 80 million next year, and soon it's $100 million. That's just not sustainable. Was there any part of that question, Lindsay, that I didn't answer?
Well, the last part was, what do you say about people claiming the council is fiscally irresponsible related to this in this way?
Well, if you don't agree with the program, then yes, we're irresponsible for funding it. If you believe that the CFO was right in requiring that the money be appropriated to the reserves, then yes, we were irresponsible. The CFO made his demands because he said that there was a liquidity problem in the year 2028. Yes, in the year 2028, not this year, not next year. So we have in the Budget Support Act, which is coming up for final reading in a couple of weeks, we have a subtitle, I think it actually went through first reading, that takes a number of steps to improve the liquidity in 2028. I think that is the way to go about it. So I don't agree if that's the reason why somebody says that we're irresponsible. If you're saying we're irresponsible because we raised taxes, we did raise taxes, not very much. I think we raised them about $120 million total, but then adopted tax credits like the child tax credit, which reduced the total new revenue from taxes. Maybe I should phrase that differently. The net new revenue from taxes to about 80 million, if I remember correctly. The actual cost of the government, that is the budget, increased by about $40 million over what the mayor had proposed. I think the mayor, in proposing $1 billion increase, I think that's a bit irresponsible is the wrong word. Not prudent in the long term, which is why I've supported a number of measures to try to see if we can't reduce the growth of government in future years and maybe even cut some spending. Next question.
Now that we have pay equity, can we focus on equal food sources and resources in Ward 7?
Interesting question. Well, there are a number of programs right now, the names of which escape me, that try to provide more fresh food options in Ward 7 and 8. There also continue to be efforts to attract grocery stores in Ward 7 and 8. The question was specifically targeted on Ward 7. I guess all I can say is that we continue to look at programs that promote healthy foods. And my recollection is, to the extent that the mayor cut existing programs, the council was successful in restoring most, if not all of them.
Okay, I have a couple of follow-ups. One on the OIG question, the OIG report. Two main parts from that report that seem concerning were around the OCFO not addressing performance deficiencies on DIFS and confirming vendor resumes. Would the council ever hold a hearing on this, as it seems like an issue with the financial billing infrastructure?
I think that's a question that's better put to the Business and Economic Development Committee. They have oversight over the Office of the Chief Financial Officer, and therefore oversight over the implementation of the DIFS. What do we call that? The DIFS technology, IT technology for managing our budget and expenditures.
The city has opportunities to purchase properties that aren't being used or not being used much to put affordable housing in Rock Creek West, including along Upper Connecticut Avenue. It seems as though those opportunities simply go by the wayside.
I'm aware of only one opportunity, and that was the Wardman Park Hotel. Now, maybe there's some small parcels, but they've not been brought to my attention. I'm not sure if the questioner is thinking in terms of the city acquiring and then having housing like public housing there, which is not as economically efficient as working with the private sector, typically nonprofit housing developers, to build affordable housing. That is a more efficient use of government dollars to get more affordable housing. I do agree that there needs to be more affordable housing in the city and more affordable housing spread throughout the city, including west of Rock Creek Park. The Wardman proposal or opportunity was not financially viable, in part because the mayor didn't support it, but also because I think the proposal was the city was going to buy it for tens of millions, if not over $100 million. And city was just not in a position to do that. The need for affordable housing, or rather the solution for affordable housing, is difficult, complex, and I mean, I think just two examples of the difficulty there is that our primary vehicle for getting more affordable housing in the city is the Housing Production Trust Fund. This year, the mayor was only able to propose $60 million. Contrast that with a few years ago when it was $400 million. The council was able to increase that to I think $81 million. Working with the nonprofit housing development community, 81, it seems to be closer to what could actually be utilized right now in the pipeline. These projects have a long pipeline, which I frankly think needs to be looked at to see if we can't shorten the pipeline. That means, when I say pipeline, I'm talking about several years between initial proposal and getting the financing and then actually beginning construction. So this year, only $81 million. The $400 million a few years ago was great, except it turns out that it exceeded the capacity of the Housing Finance Agency to issue LIHTC related bonds. And that's an important aspect of the financing. So I get it that the questioner is saying, hey, there are opportunities and the city's not pursuing them, but it's not that simple. Next question.
What can you do to help Knoll Elementary School in Ward 7 and the plan to put trailers on their field? DCPS made this decision with zero input from the school community. It seems like schools east of the river are getting the short end of the stick and no one at DCPS cares.
The short answer is I sent a letter this afternoon to the chancellor objecting. The longer answer is that I think the Ward 7 community is getting shafted. And I think it's pretty outrageous what DCPS has done. It is, as I understand it, completely removing the recreational field for that school to use it for trailers for swing space for other schools, not now. And removing that field from the school for at least 4 years, I think 5 years, and doing it without consulting the community, working with the community, basically taking advantage of the community. As I said, I sent a letter this afternoon.
I'm really concerned about the future of downtown. What did the council do in this budget to activate space and help property owners?
Uh, to activate space, well, I'll go back to the National Theater as an example. But also the mayor in the last few months proposed streamlined regulations for pop-ups, which are temporary retail uses of vacant retail space. That would be an activation. I've talked to the deputy mayor about putting pressure on the Commission on Arts and Humanities to do more with downtown institutions, arts institutions like theaters, and to look for other ways to basically work with the deputy mayor to look at ways to activate downtown spaces. Last year, we adopted legislation as part of the budget to incentivize conversion of vacant office buildings to residential. Most office buildings don't lend themselves to that conversion because the floor plates are wrong for residential. This year, we adopted we're in the process of adopting a new legislation as part of the Budget Support Act that would incentivize through a tax freeze conversion of office buildings to anything really. So it's a variation of the other program, a bit broader, a bit more flexible, a different kind of incentive, a freeze rather than an abatement. And then we also, we actually increased slightly above the mayor's request, what's called the Vitality Fund, which the deputy mayor for planning and economic development can use to attract businesses. As I understand it, generally, the incentive will be several $100,000. We're not talking about millions and millions of dollars to help to attract, relocate a business to the district and preferably downtown. That's called the Vitality Fund. So those were all steps that we took to that we've taken to try to help. Lindsay?
How do you respond to the assertion that the budget sets the city up for bigger tax hikes and cuts next year?
I don't get that thinking at all. The mayor said that. Maybe the Washington Post said that in their editorial, but probably because they were echoing the mayor. But let's be clear, the mayor set this path and she should not protest so innocently. She submitted a budget that had over $400,000 in tax increases. I might be wrong. It might have been $350,000 in FY 25 and over $400,000, maybe $450,000 in FY 26. She has a sales tax increase, which will go into effect in either 26 or 27. She proposed tripling the payroll tax. She had a new hotel tax. She proposed all kinds of taxes. So don't turn around and then complain to the council when the tax increases that we did were by comparison very, very, very modest. She had a
Did you mean millions or thousands? You said thousands. You mean millions?
millions. Thank you. She increased that payroll tax from 0.26 to 0.7 to 0.62, from 0.26 to 0.62. We took it a little higher to 0.75. So she had a roughly 40-cent increase. We added 13 cents. Yes, we did the real property tax. It affects, I think, less than 2,000 properties and only the increment over 2.5 million in value. There were a few other lesser things that we proposed, like increasing the boot fee. I don't really think that's a tax. Increasing the Sustainable Energy Trust Fund fee that's on utility bills. Can't say I really like that, but that was the only way we could restore some of the environmental programs. She took that fee, which was established for environmental purposes, and is using it for general operating expenses of the government. I mean, really, from an environmental perspective, it's shameless what she did. But don't turn around and say that it was irresponsible on our part, and don't turn around and criticize us for raising tax. She raised it hospital taxes substantially. And as I said, hundreds of millions of dollars of tax increases in the mayor's proposed budget. And of those, we rejected the hotel tax. And so the other part of the question, just because we did it this year doesn't mean we'll do it next year. And actually, I think the fact that we did it this year makes it less likely we'll do it next year. Why? Because I think council members realize that there is a lot of upset around raising taxes, and this is not something that one does so easily. Maybe I could put it differently, that there's some pain that comes with it. So we did it this year, maybe not so much next year. That's certainly what the experience was after 2021 when we raised the income tax. I was part of this because I felt that by being part of it, I could have some control over or some input in what taxes are raised and how much. And I think that if I had resisted that, then the same way that I did in 2021, that what the council would have done would have been worse.
All right, last question here. When you're weighing all the priorities in a budget, how do you rank slash triage all the needs? Do you rank based on who's the loudest from the community, based on advocacy from colleagues, policy research, etc.?
Oh, it's a combination of all the above, and I think every elected official does it differently, as in it's a combination of all the above, but in what way? So I believe every single council member objected and criticized the mayor over the pay equity fund and the lack of vouchers. So based on that alone, it was a high priority. Because I have oversight over education issues, education agencies, I saw the value of the pay equity fund. The fact that looking at childcare workers as early child educators at a point in time when children are really setting the stage for how they will learn in later years meaning beginning at kindergarten. I saw the value. There's a lot of research behind this. So that certainly was a factor, knowing the value of the program. Because there were some proposals that had a number of members talking about it, but the research wasn't so clear. So I discounted how much importance I gave to those proposals. The community comment, of course, played a role. But for example, the fact that people disrupted my press conference the other day, I can't say that was helpful. The fact that some advocates were pounding the table, saying there should be 1,000 vouchers, when I knew based on experience that there was no way that DHS would ever be able to actually put 1,000 vouchers out the door this coming year. And I'm not interested in spending money through the budget that's actually not going to get spent. That actually was my reaction to the mayor's criticism of some of the changes I made in her capital budget. Like, why are we budgeting tens of millions of dollars for capital projects in FY 26? That's 2 years from now, when you, meaning the mayor, you don't even have plans at this point. So no, I'm not going to budget debt service, which is then taking away from the ability to fund other programs. So it's a combination of all the factors. Looking at experience, what research says is effective, what the community is demanding, and what council members have raised as important. I would say, for example, that vouchers are considered much more important than, gosh, I'm gonna get in trouble if I name something specific, but I will, vouchers versus flexible scheduling in schools. And so where there was a choice, I would say, I gotta do a little bit more here rather than there.
That is our time.
Did we actually run out of questions or leave a couple on the table?
There was one more about when the BSA is gonna get voted on.
Okay, well, don't ask me that question, but the BSA probably will not be next week. In fact, it will not be next week. The decision was made this afternoon that we will not have a legislative meeting next week. The BSA, it's a very complex process. There've been a lot of suggestions for subtitles in the Budget Support Act. Those have to get written, then they have to go to our budget office. The budget office will look at the authorship. Some of it comes back to my office for writing. We'll send it down to general counsel to make sure the legislative language is correct. Questions come up all along the process. And it goes over to the Office of Revenue Analysis to see if there's a fiscal impact. And in that process, there also will maybe be some changes suggested in the wording. Then it comes back. This happens with every subtitle. And only today, no, I shouldn't put it that way. We still don't have all the feedback from the Office of Revenue Analysis that we need. There's still some subtitles that are being worked on. So it will not be next week. We're looking at the 25th. And with that, that was one bonus question. I want to thank everybody. I look forward to doing this in person next month, right, Lindsay?
That's correct.
Thank you all for participating and thank you for your questions. It's always easier when it's in person because then I actually there's a little bit of give and take and I know that I'm answering the question more properly and it doesn't sound like I'm just talking endlessly. But thank you all and you all